Spirituality is often framed as something to achieve, as if peace waits somewhere in the future once you've finally improved enough. But what if the very effort to become spiritual is what keeps you searching? This message invites you to explore the possibility that nothing spiritual needs to be gained, because what you're seeking may already be here all along, quietly waiting beneath the effort to become something more. Now let us begin this journey together, through different sections, to know what has always been quietly present. Section 1. The promise of spiritual techniques. Take a close look at what's sold today as spiritual development. You'll find stacks of techniques, morning routines, manifestation guides, vibration scales, hidden laws, and neatly organized methods that promise clarity if you stick to them faithfully. At first, this structure feels soothing, like someone finally charted the territory and all that's required is following the map. Section 2. The hidden assumption of lack. But tucked quietly inside, every promise is a core assumption. You aren't whole yet. Something vital is missing, and you must add it before you can feel complete. That assumption creates the problem, because the instant spirituality becomes something you must obtain, you've already stepped into a sense of lack. Now there's a future you who is awakened and improved, and a current you who is unfinished. The mind grabs onto that gap and turns it into a lifelong project. Fix this, heal that, improve what's broken, upgrade yourself. And no matter how earnest the effort is, notice how it never truly concludes. There's always another belief to dissolve, another pattern to clear, another energetic block to remove. Section 3. The moving finish line. The finish line constantly moves, leaving the seeker perpetually occupied and quietly exhausted. Teachings about manifestation often amplify this pattern unintentionally. They use the language of power, yet subtly convert spirituality into a transaction. Think correctly, feel the right emotions, maintain the proper frequency, and life will reward you. Miss the target and you're suddenly out of alignment. Awakening then becomes dependent on effort, consistency, and performance. But anything that relies on performance exists within time and fluctuation. It rises and falls. It succeeds and fails. Truth doesn't behave that way. What is timeless doesn't require upkeep, and what is real doesn't disappear simply because you stopped striving. Section 4. Borrowed wisdom and losing trust in yourself. Following teachers can fall into the same pattern. Not because guidance lacks value, but because the mind enjoys handing responsibility to someone else. Someone else knows more, sees more clearly, is supposedly closer to truth. Gradually and almost invisibly, you stop trusting what you can see directly. Insight becomes secondhand. Wisdom becomes borrowed. The search moves outward and upward instead of inward and honest, and the quiet feeling of distance from truth grows. Section 5. The turning point. Here's the turning point that many paths hesitate to say plainly. If what you're seeking is genuinely spiritual, you wouldn't be able to own it. It wouldn't make your identity stronger. It wouldn't make you feel advanced, special, or superior. In fact, it would do the opposite. It would feel like subtraction, like burdens lifting, like layers slipping away until what remains is simple, ordinary, unmistakably alive. So when you hear the phrase, "nothing spiritual can be gained," don't interpret it as loss. Hear precision. Hear relaxation. What you're chasing cannot deliver what you hope. Not because you're failing, but because truth cannot be acquired by a seeker. Seeing this is where the real journey begins. As the chasing slows, something unfamiliar appears, almost unsettling at first. Beneath all the effort, a quiet question arises. If nothing spiritual can be gained, what am I actually doing? Section 6. The mind's panic. When gaining stops, the mind dislikes that question. It's survived by constantly becoming becoming wiser, better, more spiritual than before. Progress has always been its compass, so when gaining collapses, the mind panics. It can feel like standing still, even going backward. But something subtler is taking place. The direction shifts from forward to inward. Section 7. Life built around becoming. Most of life is built around becoming. From childhood onward, you're taught to construct yourself piece by piece. Skills, roles, knowledge, identity, status. Even healing is often framed in that same way. Add insight, add habits, add tools. That approach works in the material world, and it's useful. But spirituality doesn't live on that timeline. Becoming always implies before and after, less and more. And anything dependent on time cannot reach the timeless. Remembering is different. Remembering doesn't improve you. Section 8. Remembering instead of striving. It reveals what striving was covering up. Like realizing you've been clenching your jaw for years and finally letting it loosen. Nothing new is gained, yet everything feels different. You see that the tension was never necessary. Spiritual remembering is like that. It isn't about climbing higher. It's about noticing what has always been here once the noise softens. This is why effort eventually burns out. No matter how sincere, effort reinforces the sense of a doer striving to arrive. And that doer, by definition, experiences separation. Separation from truth. Separation from peace. Separation from life as it already is. Remembering melts that sense of distance, not through force, but simply through seeing. Seeing that awareness was never gone, and presence was never something you had to earn. Section 9. You have already tasted this. You've tasted this before, even if you didn't label it spiritual. Moments when striving stopped on its own. When you weren't trying to improve or become anything. Maybe while watching the sky shift colors. Maybe during deep exhaustion. Maybe in a quiet moment of love. Nothing was accomplished, yet everything felt whole. Those weren't previews of a future awakening. They were reminders. Section 10. Life without the hunger to arrive. So when spirituality stops being about becoming, life doesn't turn dull or passive. It becomes more honest, alive in a different way. Growth still unfolds, but without the hunger to arrive. Change continues, but without the belief that something essential is missing. Slowly, gently, the truth behind nothing spiritual can be gained starts to land. Not as a concept, but as relief. Because what you sought was already here beneath the effort all along. As remembering deepens, the very idea of a spiritual path changes. It stops feeling like a road stretching ahead, and starts to feel like something quietly unfolding beneath your feet. Before, the path looked like progress, milestones and markers proving you were getting closer. Section 11. Where can a path lead, if nothing can be gained? Eventually, it turns upside down. If nothing spiritual can be gained, where could a path actually lead? And yet something is still happening. Life keeps moving. Understanding still deepens. But now movement is no longer driven by hunger. Section 12. The mind loves external paths. Many people picture a path as something external. Rules, stages, disciplines. The mind finds comfort in structure because it promises direction. But direction implies distance, and distance implies separation. A path you must walk toward truth assumes truth is elsewhere. Traditions have long used path language, but only as a pointer, not as a literal roadmap. Section 13. Turning inward. At some point, even that symbol needs to be released, or it becomes another attachment. Then attention turns inward, not in a self-absorbed way, but in an honest way. Instead of asking, What must I do to be spiritual? The question becomes, where do my thoughts, words, and actions arise from? That shift changes everything. Life stops being a string of techniques and becomes a mirror. Every reaction reveals something. Every choice shows alignment or resistance. Section 14. Becoming the path. Spirituality stops living only in sacred practices and begins appearing in ordinary moments. How you listen, how you speak, how you respond when nothing is at stake. This is where the idea that the path is something you become truly shows its meaning. You don't bring spirituality into life like a tool. Life itself expresses clarity, not theatrically or perfectly, but naturally. Effort gives way to integrity. Compassion arises without calculation. Even discipline becomes organic, like a plant simply leaning toward sunlight without instruction. And notice what's absent: accumulation. Section 15. Shedding instead of collecting. No hoarding realizations. No collecting peak states. Growth still happens, but through shedding rather than acquiring. As what's false falls away, the movement becomes clearer. The path doesn't lead you to truth. It dissolves the illusion that you were ever apart from it. And then the phrase, "nothing spiritual can be gained," stops sounding radical and starts feeling obvious. Section 16. Letting go of the idea that others hold the key. When the urge to gain relaxes, another illusion fades with it. The belief that someone else possesses what you lack. If nothing spiritual can be gained, then no one can store it, guard it, or dispense it. Yet the habit of looking outward runs deep. Books, teachers, traditions, all can become places where you project authority and borrow certainty instead of discovering clarity within. It often feels respectful, but it keeps your center of gravity outside yourself. Section 17. Guidance versus direct seeing. Guidance still has value. Words can point, stories can illuminate. Wisdom passed down can help you avoid unnecessary detours, but none of it replaces direct seeing. The moment you accept something only because a source declared it, rather than because you recognized it yourself, something essential is lost. Truth doesn't ask for belief, it asks for clarity. And clarity cannot be outsourced. Responsibility appears here, not as pressure, but as freedom. Being your own authority doesn't mean rejecting everything you've learned. Section 18. The courage to be honest. It means holding it lightly, questioning, testing, allowing understanding to ripen. The inner life doesn't grow from obedience. It unfolds through honesty. Honesty asks for courage, the willingness to stand without guarantees or borrowed certainty propping you up. A quiet maturity grows here, a sense that you no longer need permission to recognize truth, not because you're special, but because truth has nothing to do with status. As the need for validation fades, something steadier replaces it: discernment. You stop chasing experiences and begin recognizing alignment. You stop collecting answers and begin living the questions. Section 19. Not power, but clarity. And notice, none of this is about acquiring power or superiority. Dependency dissolves. Clarity appears. So when it's said that no one else holds the key but you, it isn't permission for ego. It's a reminder. If nothing spiritual can be gained, then nothing essential lies outside your own awareness. The door was never locked. It merely looked like something you had to earn. And there's a strange moment when you finally stop trying to arrive somewhere. Section 20. The quiet collapse of the search. It usually doesn't feel triumphant. There's no voice declaring, "This is it." Often it shows up quietly, even as disappointment. You look back at the years of seeking, books, practices, beliefs, and realize the promise was never completely fulfilled. The hunger still lingers. The restlessness never fully left. Yet right inside that honest seeing, something loosens. Because when you truly recognize that nothing spiritual can be gained, the compulsion to chase begins to fade. The search collapses, not from failure, but from understanding. Section 21. The fear of stagnation and the truth beneath it. At first, this can feel unsafe. The mind worries. If I stop seeking, won't I stagnate? Won't I become dull or unmotivated? After all, striving has been the engine of identity for so long, but gradually it becomes clear. Seeking was never the source of vitality. It was the source of tension. Section 22. Life without struggle. When seeking relaxes, awareness doesn't shrink, it sharpens. Presence doesn't weaken, it deepens. Life doesn't slow, it simply moves with less resistance. Like a river no longer fighting its own flow, energy once spent in struggle begins moving freely. And here's a difficult truth rarely spoken plainly. Seeking is a subtle form of violence against the present moment. It quietly insists that now is insufficient, that meaning lives somewhere else, later, higher, more refined. It treats life as rehearsal instead of the main event. Section 23. The return of ordinary life. When that demand drops, something remarkable unfolds. Life no longer needs to justify itself. Ordinary moments regain their richness and dignity. Silence stops feeling empty and begins to feel intelligent. Stillness stops resembling boredom and becomes depth without distraction. Love transforms too. It ceases to be something you strive to create or measure yourself against. It's no longer a spiritual achievement. Love becomes responsive, simple, human, immediate. Section 24. Love, compassion, and clear seeing. You listen more fully, you see more clearly. Compassion doesn't arise because it's morally required, but because separation no longer feels convincing. Helping others doesn't feel like sacrifice or spiritual advancement. It just feels natural. And even suffering is met differently, not denied, not glamorized, simply seen clearly. Section 25. Pain without identity. Pain still happens. Life doesn't become gentle just because the search ends. But pain no longer defines identity. Without the story of my progress or my failure, experiences don't cling the way they once did. You don't need to turn every struggle into a lesson or extract meaning from every wound. Meaning is no longer manufactured. It's already present in the simple fact of being alive and aware. Section 26. The Great Reversal. And slowly, almost too quietly to notice, the Great Reversal appears. Spirituality was never meant to make you extraordinary or elevated. It was always about becoming simple, unburdened, available, and honest with what is. When the seeker dissolves, what remains is not a higher self, but life living itself, directly, without commentary or ambition. And when everything settles, what remains is not emptiness. The final section, 27. Fullness without ownership. It's fullness without ownership, clarity without pride, depth without struggle. And from this space, the phrase "nothing spiritual can be gained" no longer sounds extreme. It feels inevitable, because truth was never a destination. It was the ground beneath your feet the whole time, simply waiting for you to stop running. Here ends this message. Now you can understand that spirituality is not something to acquire or achieve. The peace, clarity, and presence you have been seeking have always been quietly within you. The journey is not about becoming more, but about remembering what has never been lost. Let go of striving, relax into awareness, and allow life itself to reveal its natural fullness. If you feel led to go deeper, whether through more chapters in this spiritual journey or a powerful visual for a video or thumbnail, just say the word. I'm here, and I'd be honored to help bring this message fully to life.